right, good afternoon and welcome to NCIA's Industry Essentials Educational Webinar Series, our new digital platform featuring a variety of programs to provide you timely, engaging, and essential education when and where you need it most. My name is Brian Gilbert, the events manager here at NCIA, and I'm very excited to welcome you all to another episode in our NCIA Committee Insights series, this time being hosted by the Retail Committee here at NCIA. If you're just joining us, please be aware that we'll be conducting Q&A at the conclusion of the presentation, so please pose any questions you have by using the Q&A feature available along the bottom toolbar. Even if you don't have a question yourself, stop on into the Q&A area, and if you see another question which will contribute to the conversation, give it an upvote to send it to the top of the feed. Now, let's get this show on the road. In today's session, members of our Retail Committee will present a talk which will take a look at talent, brand, and compliance strategies with real-life case studies to help provide valuable takeaways for the implementation of a Retail 2.0 strategy. Thank you to our audience, and a special thanks to all the NCIA members for joining us this afternoon. And with that, please enjoy today's session entitled Cannabis Retail Success and Strategies, being moderated by Liz Stahura, President and co-founder of BDSA. Take it away, Liz.
Thanks so much, Ryan, thanks so much, Brian, and thank you to NCIA. We are very, very excited to share some of the industry expertise and retail expertise from the Retail Panel and the Retail Committee. As Brian mentioned, the Retail Committee is stacked full of retail and industry experts, and I'm really excited and very proud to moderate today's discussion with our industry experts today. As Brian mentioned, after the presentation, we will be opening up for Q&A. So please do type in your questions along the way. We'd love to make this an interactive discussion after the presentation's over. So, I would have to just say before we jump in, it's no secret that the past few months have really shifted the landscape dramatically, not just for cannabis retail, not just for cannabis, but for sort of industry as we know it. And we really are facing increasingly challenging times as an industry, as a society, and frankly, if you're anything like me, as individuals as well. The word unprecedented is really getting accused of being overused, and I understand that. But I don't know how else we can describe what's happening today. Even just 2 weeks ago, I think it was hard for any of us to really think of anything overshadowing COVID-19 and its impacts. And now here we are in another crisis. A crisis of our communities, our justice system. In some ways, it feels like the very soul of our society. And I have to be honest, it feels a little strange to be talking business as usual today when it really feels anything but business as usual. But we as an industry, we're here to serve a population who needs us and to fill a really important space in our communities and within our economies as well. And we can do that and honor that by providing the best experience, the best products, the best service, and the best support to our customers and our communities. And by the way, the numbers really do bear out that we as an industry already know the facts that cannabis is essential. So in April, as we look back to April, where general retail was down, and here's that word again, an unprecedented 16%, with some of those retail sectors being down 50, even 75, 80% and more, cannabis sales, when compared to April of 2019, we're up in high single and or double digit numbers across the country. Medical channels in states such as Arizona and Maryland providing high double digit growth. Adult use and recreational channels also seeing steady growth in a month where the term unprecedented again is not necessarily an understatement. So it's not 100% rosy picture. There are new challenges and opportunities. We're facing changing regulations, social distancing, social unrest now. The long-term economic impacts are going to be a continuing challenge, but where we can keep focus on the essential nature of our business and ensure that we're doing the right things right and focusing on best practices to not only weather the storm, but really to thrive and to continue to support our customers and our communities and continue to show just how essential cannabis is and will continue to be in our communities, in our economy. So with that being said, it's a real pleasure to introduce today's retail experts who are going to be providing you with concrete best practices and guidance for continued success in this new world. So without further ado, would love to jump in and start to introduce you to our panelists. Again, as mentioned, I know we're repeating this often because it is important. Please do make sure to utilize that chat function. As those of you who don't know me, I am Liz Stahura, president and co-founder of BDSA, once BDS Analytics. And I'm not going to spend too much time on my bio or background because I really want to put the spotlight on our retail experts. So LARINA, as our first industry expert, the director of operations for Lucy Sky Cannabis Boutique. LARINA, do you mind just giving a couple sentences about your background and maybe share with us, just so we can get to know you a little better, what's one new hobby that you've picked up since COVID-19 started?
Hi, yeah, so a little bit about me. So I've been in the cannabis retail space for about 7 years now. It's something I'm very passionate about. I love the retail setting and just, making a difference in people's lives and, helping progress this industry further. As far as a hobby I've picked up since COVID-19, I've been really into newfound hobby of home decorating and planting, spending a lot of time at home. So I recently just moved into a new place and, just kind of spending my time creating a beautiful space around me. And yeah, it's actually been, despite all of the chaos around us, I feel like the cannabis industry and my personal life has been actually thriving pretty well.
Great to hear that, LARINA. Thank you so much for joining us today. Moving on to our next expert, Ryan, co-founder of Digital Venture Partners. Do you mind just giving us, Ryan, quick couple sentences about you and your background, and let's change it up a little bit for you. Let us know what your new favorite show is since the binge watching times of COVID-19 have started.
Oh, that's a great one. Thanks, Liz. Hi, everyone. I'm Ryan Rapaport. I'm the co-founder of Digital Venture Partners. We're a venture firm that works within content and brand creation in cannabis. So I'm mostly working today on the brand and content side. We've been working, putting out digital content with Black Enterprise Magazine on a new show called Green Enterprise, where we interview leading experts in the cannabis industry and have them talk a little bit about getting into the cannabis business and what that partakes. And today, for me, the best show I've been watching, I just got into Ray Donovan, which I've never started watching before, but I've been pretty busy, so I'm not making it through as quicker as I have made through other ones, particularly at the beginning of the COVID pandemic here. But now I'm allowing myself to watch things, and it's making its way through slowly. But thanks to everyone for having us today.
Nice. Thank you, Ryan, so much for joining. All right, last and certainly not least, we have Melissa Jane, or MJ, as I know her, and as many of you probably know her, STAPLEY, the founder of MJ Hybrid Solutions. And MJ, do you want to give us a little bit about your background, and maybe since you are going last, you get to pick whether you want to tell us about your favorite show since COVID-19 started.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Liz. Excited to be here, you guys. So my background, I've been in the cannabis industry for close to 6 years. And I started MJ Hybrid Solutions 3 years ago, but before that, I was working in sales and management for a couple CBD manufacturers, CBD and THC manufacturers. So yeah, I'm very passionate about the industry. I have 12 years of corporate sales experience and management experience. And so one thing, I guess, during COVID, one big change I made is I moved from California to Scottsdale, Arizona. So that was a big change. So the last couple months, kind of like LARINA talked about, I've actually been having to make a lot of different changes, but it's helped and put me in the right direction, and I'm thriving as well, along with a lot of people in this industry, hopefully. And my favorite TV show right now, hands down, is Working Moms.
Nice. I like it. All right, well, I am going to move us into the meat of the presentation now. And as we get started, LARINA, do you want to go ahead and kick us off and get us going?
Yes, absolutely. So when it comes to retail, hiring the right people is vital to the success of your business. The people you put in place are the face of your company. They are how your customer base perceives your entire company. So you want to make sure, especially in this industry that does have a lot of taboos and stigmatisms, you want to make sure first and foremost that your staff is professional and represents your company and your brand in a professional way. And also compliance is number one. So they have to have a knack for compliance and, complying with any changes that are coming up, any new rules and regulations, because we all know things change quickly in this industry. So staying up on that at all times is very, very important. And not only that, but also people oriented, because being on the retail floor, customer service is not for everyone. It is absolutely an art in its own. So having employees who are people oriented, who are empathetic and compassionate and can really level with people on a personal level, because customers want someone that they can relate to. So, it's very important to make sure those employees that you have can get on that level with your customers, as well as being problem solvers, having lots of things always going on in the cannabis industry, especially your managers. You want to make sure they can solve problems quickly and, move through things in an efficient way. It's also very important to look for people who want to stay, because unfortunately this industry tends to have a high turnover rate, especially in the retail space. But it's not impossible to find those employees who really stand behind your brand and who really want to grow with your company, because customers do not want to see a new face every time they walk through the door. It really will affect your customer retention, for better or for worse, if you have high turnover or low turnover. So, definitely target that initially. Find out what your potential employees are looking for before you hire them, and, look for that longevity. If you're mostly new to, if you don't quite have a retail space yet and you're looking to get into it, you're looking for where to post jobs, there are some great platforms. Like Vanxt is a really great platform to look for cannabis candidates. And, oftentimes I'll use like Indeed, although, it does require filtering through quite a bit of resumes. So give yourself enough time to go through all of those candidates, and don't hire so quickly. Like, take your time hiring the staff that you want to represent your company. Always come prepared with interview questions that will help to identify what your store values are in that candidate. So, why did you leave your last job? Says a lot about someone's personality, stuff like that. And, I like to conduct the first interview as like work related. Why did you leave your last job? What are your goals? What are you looking for? And then the second interview I like to conduct in person, so you can really get a feel for that person and how they will vibe with the rest of the team, because that is crucial as well. You got to have a cohesive unit that everybody gets along well together, because they're together a lot. So making sure everybody vibes together, and holding everyone to the same standards and having them be accountable for their job, and set that standard in the beginning, in the interview process. Lay out clear job descriptions of what you expect, lay out your company's roles or your company's expectations and the role's expectations, and identify that compliance is number one. They have to be compliant, and then customer service and everything else is equally as important, but without compliance we have nothing. So and give them feedback throughout the whole process. Make sure that you're following up with them, you're letting them know where they're at, what you expect, and so forth. You can skip to the next slide. So you always want to make sure you're setting your employees up for success. So that, again, starts in the interview process, and, goes from there. You want to give your employees the tools they need to succeed, because the main reason people don't stay is because they don't feel like their company is investing in them. So invest in your employees, because happy employees are loyal, and loyal employees are more productive. And the main reason people do leave is because they lack professional development. So, invest in your employees and invest in knowing that you're hiring the right people and you're having them do this job. If you are stuck with a bad hire, you want to handle it pretty quickly, but work with them a little bit, communicate. Know what your expectations are, make sure they know what their expectations are, and give feedback. Reassign if you need to, but if it's not working out, you need to figure out when to cut your losses, because it will cost you more in the long run if you hang on to them. But document everything, be clear on why you're terminating if you have to get to that point, but be professional about it, wish them well. I think MJ might have some stuff to contribute to that.
Yes, I do. So great job, LARINA. Thanks so much. As we get into the training and development, first, I want to go back and talk briefly about the setting employees up for success and kind of what you talk about, obviously setting the standards from the beginning. But some things, when you hire and you bring on your new team, it's so important that you focus on them. And I always say this, focus on your people more than your product, and you'll be unusually successful. So this goes for your employees and your customers. You've got to focus on your people first. So you need to build a relationship with them. You need to understand their needs. Every employee is different in what drives them and the type of coaching they like. So when you understand them individually, it makes holding them accountable and coaching them much easier. So they will actually listen and implement what you say. We'll get into training and development and the different types in the next one. Encouraging development is another way to set them up for success. And then also giving them responsibility and accountability. So set goals as a team and individually. Include them in the goal setting, get feedback, suggestions, employees that feel important and part of the group. And this is something that we'll also touch base on later on in culture. But when they feel like what they say matters, they're going to work harder for you and your customers. And the one thing I want to say about the bad hire, you pretty much nailed it on the head. You got to get rid of them. If it's a cancerous person that's going to spread negativity, if they're lazy, bad attitude, those are the people you got to just cut the cord and get rid of them right away. However, if you have someone that you feel like is a bad hire because maybe they're not connecting well with the customers, or maybe they're not understanding the product and they're a little bit slow, but they're eager to learn and they're coachable, then you have to really sit down and have an open discussion and determine if that's someone worth keeping. Because I'll tell you from an example, with the group that I was training out in Michigan with multiple dispensaries, their first group, we were going through a customized training program, and they were very concerned about one person and wanted her to go, but she was very eager to learn, but she was just scared because she was new to cannabis. And we talked about it. We decided it was best for her to stay. I worked with her a little bit extra on the side, and she's now their leading gross sales bud tender out of all their stores. So you don't want to give up easily, but you also have to look at what the issue is at hand. And so some people you have to just get rid of them as quickly as possible. And others, if they're coachable, then you have to determine if that's someone worth putting the effort into to make them better. Liz, if you want to go to the next slide, we can kind of jump into the importance of frontline training, which goes back to setting your team up for success. So like LARINA mentioned, I think it was about 40% of employees say that they've left their cannabis job because of lack of professional development. So this has been kind of an area of opportunity that I've seen personally in this industry is not, and I get it, because when you're opening a store and you get going with regulations and compliance and everything in place, it can get so overwhelming. And so sometimes we let that kind of go as second nature or put it in the back door of like actually training and taking care of our employees. However, I'm going to say the word essential. We hear that a lot, but training your frontline employees is essential and key to growing a successful business. They are the face of the company, and they are the reasons that your customers will return based on the experience they had. People are loyal to people. And so how your employees communicate and create that experience for customers determines if they return and tell others. So I always say there's 3 ways to grow your business. You get new customers, you get them to purchase more, and you get them to return. Training and development is key to growing in these 3 areas, especially the last 2. Now, the type of training to focus on, because as you start, as you're starting a cannabis business, there's a lot of areas that you need to focus on and a lot of avenues that you have to go through to make sure that you're compliant and everyone understands, it's a new industry. So sales and customer service training, having effective communication is key to meeting your customers' needs. And this is really where you help drive sales and customer loyalty. So having a sales and customer training program in place, a training methodology is key here, key to growing your business. The product knowledge and education training. We all know education is key, and understand what you are selling is important in ensuring that we are meeting our customers' patients' needs, and obviously for the safety of them as well. And I think that it's important to have both the generalized education knowledge and then also based on what products, brands you carry specifically in your retail business, developing a training specific to those brands. Don't just rely on the brands or the brand ambassador to educate your employees. Have a program in place or have a follow-up in place internally, or work with an external company on developing a solid training plan to ensure that you're effectively selling this brand and understanding how to educate consumers on the specific brand you carry in your store. Last but definitely not least is compliance and responsible vendor training. Now, this is a requirement in most states and key to reduce liabilities, but we also have to remember with compliance and regulations, like LARINA mentioned, it is always changing. So understanding that it's always changing is important to have a training in this area that can adapt to these changes consistently and as an ongoing basis. And one thing I want to end with on this, it doesn't start and end with training. So I've seen a lot of times when people throw a training program and their employees say, go do the training, and expect them to come out and just kill it without really having an implementation plan in place. So one of my favorite phrases is information without implementation has no value. So what are you doing as a business owner or manager to ensure that your employees are implementing what they learn and developing on an ongoing basis? This is where the leadership within your team is key in setting up your management team for success in rolling out the training, having a training guide, having an implementation plan in place. And also, like LARINA said, is from the beginning, setting those expectations. And you want to hold your team accountable, especially on the floor. So having a manager or lead that is on the floor, kind of overlooking and listening to the employees on an ongoing basis, speaks huge in volumes and how much more you will see an increase in your sales if you do this. So obviously I can't speak for all training programs, but if you do follow a training program and methodology and your team implements them, the results can be huge. So in this next slide, if you want to go to the next slide, Liz, I'm gonna let LARINA talk some more about what she does with her team, her dispensaries, and what training best practices they have put into place to be successful.
Yeah, so as far as training strategies in place, it's always good to start day one. As soon as they fill out the paperwork, you are, going over your company values and what you expect from the employees, as well as, like you said, compliance. And Cannabis 101 is a good place to start, especially for those kind of not familiar with the cannabis space, might be new to the industry, setting clear guidelines, because you always want your employees to be knowledgeable, because your customers might not know everything about all of these products. So, developing that from the beginning, and having ongoing training. I like to have my staff kind of shadow initially, shadowing somebody, seeing how they interact with your customer base, seeing the way you talk to them and what they say about certain products, and then from there have them be shadowed by somebody else before they can run their own drawer. They should be confident in their abilities, at least semi-confident in all of the products, and a lot of this you'll learn as you go, but floor training is very crucial. Learning hands-on is very successful for a lot of bud tenders. Leadership and management training is very important. You know, making sure that the people that you have in place controlling the store and managing the team and the daily operations, knowing how they deal with people and how they deal with confrontation. You know, because not everybody's always happy all the time, but it's how you react to it. You know, somebody's at a high level, they're very stressed out. Can your manager kind of take it down a notch, you know, because you want to de-escalate the situation, be proactive instead of reactive. And getting the team engaged during training, you know, doing team building exercises for meetings, and, you know, just getting everybody, you know, a sense of community, a sense of family, and, you know, getting them excited about it, making things fun, making it a friendly competition, really helps to drive that team engagement.
Great. And then if you could go to the next slide there, Liz. Hey everyone, Ryan Rapaport here, and everything that MJ and Liz were speaking to there is definitely fundamental in what I'm going to be talking about in branding and marketing. And what we're really seeing now with everything shifting after the pandemic, with more digital sales, more delivery, more curbside parking, is really how people differentiate their brand is what's going to set apart the businesses moving forward after this. And one of the things that I thought was really interesting that LARINA and MJ both focused on was the idea of having your teams properly trained and what that means to your brand. And I think that's where I'll start off is, you know, this idea of a brand identity is something that's cultivated across your whole organization, whether it's your marketing, your day-to-day retail operations, your your interactions with vendors and people in the community. That all feeds into a brand identity. And particularly when it comes to retail, we really want to talk about who is your target audience. And what I mean by that is, who are your customers going to be? You know, have you really done the casing to have a good understanding of who will be buying from you? And really that's where audiences can start to be cultivated. And really when I look at the target audience and people who are interested in a brand, I really ask, how am I communicating with them? And, you know, if you're in a part of town that has a younger demographic, or if a lot of your sales are coming from an older demographic from a certain area, how are you connecting with those people? Is it via text? Is it via email? Is it via social media? And really identifying how people communicate, or how those target audience people who are buying from you now are communicating with their environment. And that takes a lot of looking into the social media sphere, looking into competitors, and really that's where we see retailers start to differentiate themselves is, hey, I really understand who my customers are, and what does that mean for how I'm going to raise sales in this particular product, or how I'm going to set up an event. And obviously this is all changing. You know, we see here in the background a really beautiful retail shop, but really what we know is that that's conversation is shifting as well. So I really, you know, if anyone could get a takeaway from this whole idea of brand identity, it's really going to play into the content that people are putting out, whether that's, you know, whatever medium you're using to get that to people, whether it's text messaging or email or social, or, you know, even calling people or meeting them at the curbside and enhancing that experience. It's really going to affect the content, and the story that you're telling is really going to affect how your audience or your customers are interacting with you. And really, you know, a couple of different ways of looking at that. You can go and see people in certain hashtags and what's performing very well, or you can actually go and reach out to people and say, hey, what would you recommend for contacting these type of people, or what type of content has been working well for you, so you can start adapting that conversation and really communicating with your customers. If you can move forward there, Liz. Now, going back to talking about engagement here, these are just a few ideas for how you can engage with your customers and your audience. Now, live events, obviously that's going to be changing, but I'm a believer that there are going to still be live events. They're going to be bigger ones. I think some people are going to flock to them based on people still wanting to kind of be out and kind of move away from the stigma and the issues of this pandemic. And so while I believe the live events are coming back, I believe they're going to change a little bit. I think they're going to be smaller. I think they're going to be more intimate settings, and there's going to be a lot more precautions. So start figuring out ways to have a discussion around, hey, what can we do to interact and create an experience for the people who are interested in our retail store? And, obviously that's changed because not everyone can be in the stores, or some areas where that's allowing and opening up. So that will still be a thing. But I'm a believer that, and I've heard this in many conversations I've had with other industry experts, that really the idea of delivery, the idea of curbside pickup is probably going to stay prominent for quite some time, if not be the new storyline. Now, engaging with your audience also means meetups. So representing the brand out in the community. Obviously, you want to behave while you're doing this, be careful or be mindful of that you representing your retail brand, and it's a small industry and people can definitely work and get around when relationships are soured or people are acting inappropriately. So definitely think of a way of finding out there. And I know that these are going to be more digital meetups probably for the short time, but still a great way to have a conversation and join. I definitely see even this as a medium for doing that. We have many people coming together in one place and having a conversation, and it's a great way of promoting you and your brand. And going back to the storytelling theme, this is something that we've seen performed very, very well by some of the leading brands and retailers out there. I'm going to talk a little bit about that more so, and how people have been able to transform the conversation, whether it's around music or customer stories or the actual product and the differentiation out there. There's a lot of different ways that you can change and control the narrative, how people view your stores. And that's really because of everything that's happening in how people are consuming content differently these days, how people are more inbound and looking into digital spheres more during their day. This is never a better time to think about, hey, how do we want people to see us? What's the story we want to tell, and how are we going to tell that digitally? And, definitely plays into the culture of the industry. I'm not quite too sure of the makeup of everyone in here, but what we found out on the culture side is that there's a big need for kind of having an old school mentality when we're talking about cannabis business operations. And what that means is, the way that people have traditionally viewed cannabis has changed, right? This has become more corporate, but we know that a lot of the companies out there that have kind of gotten away from what made this an industry in the first place have found that they are not able to compete with the people that understand, okay, we got to bootstrap this. We don't want to be spending too much money. We don't want to let things get out of control. I think it's shifted in how people deal with their team members, right? And so when I say the culture here, I really mean that we want people to understand that, hey, there's something that is involved around this plant. There's relationships around it, and we want to foster that. And so when going back, and talking about the culture there, we have to have respect for that. And whatever industry you are, we've seen some of the bigger LPs and multi-state operators that have felt that. And then we've seen some of the bigger stories, which I'll be talking about in a second in terms of success. We've seen those people working with culture to help promote and grow their brand and their influence. And then, when I say social engagement, this all kind of ties back to that idea of digital communication, but you really want to include everyone in that conversation. When I mean include everyone, I mean mostly internally, but also your customers. And when I say internally, I mean have your employees be out there in those conversations, representing your team well. Make sure you kind of have a firm understanding of what you want people when they're commenting on people's things, to have a kind of a theme around your stories. And when they're posting things about your organization that you share with them, have them have a certain story around that. And what that leads to is people kind of experiencing your brand through the network that your bud tenders are growing, through the way that your managers are their networks of your managers, of your grow and teams and all that. So when I say include everyone, just think that is even as far as Glassdoor reviews and controlling and having a conversation there is very important for how your brand is seen today. And next slide there, Liz. So everything I just spoke to there, I want to kind of drill in here into some specific cases and some other successful brands and retailers that we've seen. Now, going and talking about this idea of the culture and traditional market of cannabis, I want to look at cookies. Now, I'm sure pretty much everyone in here, or if not, we'll give a little breakdown here, but Cookies is a brand that kind of came up out of the San Francisco Bay cannabis culture, and it's grown kind of be recognized as a brand for culture as it comes to clothing and apparel, but it was also based around this idea of running an illegal cannabis business and integrating that into culture. And that's what it came from. And so Cookies is now a fully licensed brand. They have their own dispensaries. They've actually leveraged that brand to implement their standards and procedures across grows, across retail. And what they've done is they've gone and partnered directly with the people in the communities, mostly social equity licensees, to help them bridge the gap between the knowledge and the backing of brand and tying that to the retail. And that for me was just like one of the cooler things I've seen, because there are so many groups out there trying to grow across multiple states, but this ends up being a very light lift for that team and allows them to stay more flexible and focus on their core of what they're doing well with their brand. Now, and for winners of the weed recession, major farms. So when I say weed recession, I think we're still seeing the bottom drop out. I talk about all these companies that have thrown hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars away, trying to be the next Walmart and Starbucks of cannabis. Meantime, you have the farmers, the people who have been growing for years and years in places like Humboldt and in the Pacific Northwest and in California or in Colorado. All these people that have been growing there for a long time that were operating sound businesses, just may have been doing it in the black market. And those people, what we've seen is as those people have come into this market and have gotten all their licensing and have been able to bridge the gaps in the legality around what they were operating previously, we've seen a lot of very strong businesses. And I mentioned Major Farms. Major Farms is a small family-run operation out of Mendocino. It's some younger guys who really have fought hard to grow a number of their licenses. I think right now they have 10 licenses, including production, cultivation, and sales and distribution. And I look at them because these are guys who have been growing, not just growing their flower, but growing their brand by partnering with companies like Willie's Reserve or 2 Chainz Gas. And these were all done through distribution relationships, but it just goes to show you that if you're in the background working and putting a quality product out in front of people, you can build your own brand. And actually, they just came out with a new logo, which is even cooler than the one they just had here. And I wish I had posted that one, but definitely someone to look into. And these are just, a couple of guys who are out there farming across multiple grows and putting out superior product. And that's what's helped them grow. And I'm really excited as a partner of them as well. And then I also want to talk about controlling that brand story as well, finally here with Viola. If you aren't familiar with Viola, it's a brand that was started by Al Harrington, a former NBA basketball player. I had the pleasure of interviewing him recently. And what I can tell is that the brand that he cultivated here was all around the story of his grandmother. And what he's done is he's grown that story into a multi-state operation of cultivation, production, and retail. And so why I want to focus on that is not only have they used that story of family and medicine and quality to build their brand, but they've tied that back into giving back to the community through micro and macro activism. When I say micro, they go and they help individual communities that they're working with by establishing grant programs like they've done with Viola Cares. And at the same time, and just making sure, can everyone hear me okay?
Yep. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Yeah, sounds like I was having an issue there. And what they're doing on the micro side is going and actually encouraging people to have that conversation and then backing it up with money with their Viola Cares program. And at the same time, they're doing on a macro level, working with the Black Caucus and actually going into statewide and federal legalization conversations to help influence to make sure that people aren't being left behind in this legislation. And we saw that most recently what they were able to do in Illinois and Maryland, helping to convert and create more social equity licenses and make sure the people that are winning these licenses are really deserving of that type of license. And if you're not familiar with it, social equity licenses essentially assist people who come from communities that have been adversely affected by the war on drugs. This can be socioeconomic, this can be because of previous arrests and arraignments. And what that means is that these are people that may not necessarily have had the financial resources. You're usually looking anywhere from, you know, depending on the state, $750,000 to $1 million to get a cannabis operation going. I'd say that's conservative. And so that in itself excludes people, but being able to tie back the conversation of, we want to help communities grow, we want to give back, we want to help people who've been most hurt by cannabis. We found that that is just as powerful as, hey, I also have really good cannabis. No, this is someone who's involved in the community, they're giving back to the community, and they want to grow their brand alongside the community. And that's a huge fan of that. And I think that goes back to, how are you having your brand perceived? What are you doing to impact that? And how are you controlling that story? And Arjun, I'll just say real quick while we're flipping to the next slide, I saw Arjun ask a question about bridge the gaps in financial literacy. And what I'll say is that that's a big issue. There are a lot of people in states that have been able to get good licensing, like Oklahoma and all the growth that they've had there. And a lot of people who are just getting an inexpensive license and then, oh, not really doing anything with it. So I think there's a huge gap to bridge there in terms of financial literacy and running a business in retail. And as we've seen from some of the questions asked too, there's probably a big need for that out there.
So company culture, Ryan, are you starting this off with that, or do you want me to talk about it first?
Yeah, I'll swing into the beginning here. My apologies there.
Okay.
So, you know, part of what I was talking about, I know when we were saying company culture and what that means for your brand, I totally believe that this is something that you should integrate into the conversation, talking about your team members, making them thought leaders in the industry as well, and building them up with your brand. And I really think it's very important to have a discussion about what you believe is important, and that your team members are examples of that. And, you know, that comes down to really having, providing value to your employees, and therefore valuing them. And by doing those little things, I think I've heard that it's about, cannabis employees are paid about $1 more per hour, but in the end, it is a retail job, and there's usually not a lot of reward as much as there is risk. But what we really like to see is when you give back to your employees by showing them, hey, we can have contests. I saw someone talking about that earlier, then, or even just recognition, and doing that through social as well are really great ways of helping promote that culture.
One thing I'll add here, and I know LARINA I think has some stuff to add as well about company culture, is really when it comes to setting that tone of what you want, whether it's kind of what Ryan talked about, going back to, you know, you're tying in old school cannabis culture. If you're focusing on the mainstream, it's really getting your employees involved and getting them, you know, speaking that same language and talking about it and being a part of it as if they're, you know, it's all one team. And so that's, you know, different ways to do that is making sure that you're going out, you're doing fun team projects, or you're incentivizing, you're getting out into the community where you are, where your store is, and that you're actually getting involved with the community matters, and helping not only promote yourself, and as you guys are, is kind of getting rid of that stigma, but it's also that you're, you know, you care about your community and you're helping it grow and you're trying to make a difference. So LARINA, I'll let you talk a little bit about, you know, the online reviews, adaptability within the company culture, and kind of share some of what you guys do at your stores.
Yeah, for sure. Can you move on to the next slide, Liz? But yeah, absolutely. You know, no matter how big or small your company is, you always want to make your employees feel valued, because they are what make your brand what it is. You know, so really make your team feel the love, you know. And as far as the company culture being adaptable, you know, this industry is constantly evolving and changing, and new trends are emerging. So, you know, being adaptable and open to new trends and what your customers are looking for, and the new best thing in the industry is very important, you know, rather than just being like, oh, well, this is the way it's always been, so this is how we do it. You know, really just being open to evolving and changing, and, you know, having your staff evolve and change with you. You know, if you're able to adjust to change, it will make you more successful. As far as online reviews go, you definitely want to make sure those are organic. They are very important. That's how everyone views your brand. Unfortunately, a lot of the times people only leave a review when they're upset. So it is important to engage with your customers, that you know, if the staff is seeing that this employee or this customer is having a really good experience, you know, be like, hey, if you really liked your service today, you know, drop us a nice Google review or whatever. But there's no harm in asking for reviews, but you definitely want to make sure they're organic reviews. And, you know, in the times that you do get bad reviews, take that negative feedback constructively, and always be professional in the reply. Always give a reply, no matter if it's good or bad, because it speaks volumes for your brand. You know, if other people reading your reviews can see you responding and giving back, and, you know, but always be professional in that reply, even if it's a bad review. As far as volunteering, we like to do, you know, stuff within our community. We've done stuff, you know, just to give back, things like, you know, we donated a bunch of school supplies to a low-income school, just kind of volunteering within the community. We've done like a food bank thing where we, you know, went and helped serve lunch to the homeless, and, you know, just little ways to get involved within your community. There's lots of ways. Well, I mean, with COVID, it's a little limited right now, but, you know, ways to get involved, even if it's not in person, you know, donating to certain charities, or, you know, whatever way you can get involved in your community, because your community is who supports you. So it's really important as a cannabis business to give back to that community.
Thank you guys so much, Lorena, MJ, and Ryan. Some really great insights and some really good tactical and practical pointers and things to walk away with. I think for me, the big takeaway was just really striking to me how all three of you coming at this advice from three different perspectives. I think all three of you settled on the fact that people really are our biggest asset, and whether that be our internal people, being our teams and our teammates who make up our business, or our external people who are our community and our patients and our customers. Clearly that is where the focus needs to be, and really great to just pile that home for the audience. Would love to open it up to a little bit of Q&A. We've got about 10 minutes here, so tons of questions coming in. Thank you all so much. Panelists, if you would like to put your videos on so folks can see your lovely faces as we're asking these questions, please feel free. No pressure if you don't feel up to it, but I always like to see everybody's faces there. Wonderful. Hi, guys. All right, so let's start with actually a question that came in from the audience that I thought was a really great one. And the question is actually focused on Pennsylvania, but I think it's a good question for all of us, because I do think that this is not just a Pennsylvania challenge. The question is from Cliff, that Pennsylvania is still a medical-only state, so at least half the dispensary customers are over 50. And unfortunately, it's difficult to find a dispensary employee over the age of 25. So his question is around how do we get more diversity into our staffing and our staffing opportunities? And MJ, Lorena, either of you want to take a crack at that one?
Yeah, I mean, we've had, you know, several employees over the age of 50, but I mean, it's definitely a younger industry. But I mean, I don't think it's so much about it is a very young industry and that's just kind of the way it is. But I mean, having employees that can relate and, level with someone who is of an older age and, just get on their level, find out what it is they're looking for. I think that is very important. And it's less about the age of the employee and more about how they can help that employee and educate them. But I mean, it's definitely, there are older people who work in this industry, but I mean, I think it's more about just being able to give them the tools they need to educate themselves on cannabis and, find what helps for them, whether they're 21 years old or 50 years old.
Well, and I have to imagine, and MJ, you probably have some perspective on this. I have to imagine that training is really critical here. So training these younger employees to have that empathy and to have that understanding of how to get to what the right products are for the right demographic, for the right need states, for the right experience, whether you're dealing with a patient or a more traditional customer. MJ, any thoughts on training protocols or tools or technologies that are available to help get these bud tenders that sort of exposure?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think a lot of that comes down to the company setting up, having a training program in place when they open or when they hire on and bring on these employees to set them up for success. I heard a lot. I get a lot of older folks that will reach out to me because they're interested in being a bud tender, but they feel like when they go to the dispensary, it's nothing but young people. And I think that's just kind of the culture, going back to culture and old school cannabis, and it's that adjustment. So as a business owner, I think if you want to diversify, you have to make that clear and kind of, do what you can to put the word out there within your community that that's what you want to do. And obviously, though, entry-level jobs, regardless, are usually younger people to begin with anyways. No matter what industry you're in, right? So depending on what you're paying them per hour and how that can go into effect with who you're hiring. But in terms of like turnover and the young employees, it's just really, if you want them for long term, it's setting them up and investing in them and having a training program for them. And then for people that are looking to get in on their own, there are a lot of online training programs available with different companies. I do MJ Hybrid Solutions, that's what we do. But we work primarily with companies to set up the companies and their employees for training. But a lot of individuals go through it as well. And so there's a lot of different educational companies there that can set them up. I just think as an employer, it should be your responsibility to invest in your team to do so.
That makes a lot of sense, MJ. I'm actually going to roll up a few of these questions because we're getting a lot of questions along a similar theme, which is all around benefits and perks and what is feasible, what is realistic, what should employees expect to receive within the cannabis space, and what should cannabis businesses expect to provide. And then open that up, actually, any of the panelists who'd like to take a stab at tackling that one.
Yeah, I can touch on that a little bit. So as far as benefits, I mean, a lot of cannabis businesses are offering, health insurance and stuff like that. Some of the perks of the job, obviously vendors do a lot of sampling and stuff. That's absolutely one of the perks of the job. You get to try a bunch of different products. You get to provide your feedback on those products. And, ways to kind of incentivize staff and things that, high sales goals and stuff, setting goals with a reward at the end, whether it's store credit or, whoever sells the most Puffco Peaks this month gets a Puffco Peak. Just kind of building a selling mentality to help build incentives. Definitely helps with that, but there are lots of perks. As an entry-level bud tender position, it's absolutely not the highest paid position, but there are perks for those looking to get into the space and ways that they can benefit and help grow themselves professionally as well.
Ryan, do you have any thoughts there?
Yeah, and it's on the actual paid benefits thing. That's always a complicated question as it pertains to federally legal cannabis. And I think to take a step back from that, it's really important to understand that these people who are joining your businesses are often doing it at a lower pay than they were making before, or maybe at the same exact, but doing it out of passion. So whatever you can do to encourage that, whether it is those programs or it's things like, having team days or having vendor days where they come in just to train your team members, you really have to think of ways that you're giving back to your teams and helping them enhance in this experience. And we've seen a lot of people who come into the industry and are a bud tender, one day, or a retail associate one day, or maybe a manager the next year. The year after that, they're the director of operations, and the third year they're a COO. So these are people that are joining the industry to grow, and if you can keep feeding that through things like education, trainer, and vendor engagement, then you'll have a stronger team and a better brand, I believe.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, Ryan. We've got a ton of questions here. I don't think we're going to have time to get through all of them in the time we have, but I want to switch gears a little bit and answer a question that came in earlier, back on the branding, Ryan, and the culture piece. You mentioned micro events and how that may be, at least temporarily and maybe for a longer period of time, a bit of the new wave of the future. Can you give us a specific example of a micro event that you're working with or helping to plan or starting to concept out to give a little bit more of a tangible example of what this might actually look like?
Yeah, it's a great question, Liz. No, it's funny you mentioned that because our part of our business model was very much event-based. And we just had some events scheduled for Los Angeles at the end of March that were obviously put on hold, and we'll come back to them, of course. But I also believe that conversation has totally shifted in how people are going to engage. What are the rules and regulations going to be post-COVID in terms of, hey, we're out here in California. It's different than what's happening in Arizona or Wisconsin or Florida right now. So you have to also take that into account. I think that a lot of these events are also going to have to be digitally impacted. And so whether that's, having software, and this is something, I don't know if anyone else, we're on Zoom right now, but, having software platforms out there that people can engage with people on and have conversations, then tying that into things like swag, contests. I've seen a couple of groups that are doing things like that, and even like creating tools that have, instead of having like a trade show where we know a lot of brands and retailers go to learn about each other, actually having virtual trade shows where you play games online to potentially win a t-shirt or to engage. So that's how, when I think micro events, I think that it's going to become more intimate, these get-togethers, because there's not going to be 100 people at once. At the same time, it's going to, you're going to have to involve people digitally too.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I've got to say, I was already using Zoom quite a bit for work, but I never expected to use Zoom so much in my social life as I have in the last 2 months. So certainly part of the new normal. One last question, I think before we wrap it up, and if we didn't get to your question, folks, the panelists are online and engaged, and we'll certainly be following up with you all individually. Thanks again, everyone, for all these great questions and some great discussion. MJ, I'm going to throw this one back to something that you actually said earlier in the presentation about figuring out how to play that balance between not giving up on your employees versus knowing when to walk away from an employee. And this kind of combines actually two questions that we got, which was, one was, how do you deal with a bad hire? And the other was, how do you know when to keep an employee around? So yeah. Just kind of interested to hear your thoughts on, what are some of those trigger points that say this is a fixable challenge, or some of those trigger points that you've seen in your experience that say maybe this is a bigger issue and not something necessarily that the business owner is going to want to tackle?
So, well, I think what the number one most important thing is, are they coachable and are they adaptable? So there's a difference between people, like you can even have someone, right, that you're like, oh, this person is a great salesman, but he has a bad attitude. He's causing negativity across the team. So you make the choice to get rid of him, right? Even though it's hard because he's a good salesman. Where you have someone who's coachable and adaptable, gets along great with everyone, but maybe is just struggling. She's struggling with the upselling component, or she's struggling with how to connect with the the over 65 age group that comes in. And so I think that's where it's the coachability that you have to look for. And if they're able to be coachable with you and you're willing to put in the time to work with them, then those ones sometimes end up coming out being some of your best employees, and they end up getting promoted, like kind of like I said in that example with a girl I trained in Michigan. And so I think the biggest thing is if the attitude, if they're lazy, right? So one time I was doing a training and the guy literally fell asleep in the first hour, like asleep during a training. And I just looked at the owner and I said, he's got to go. Like, it's like, that's, I mean, that's just lack of respect and not caring, right? So if you're going to have those people that think that they're above, there's nothing you can do that can change. It's not, even if you think they might be a good salesperson or bring in money, it's not worth it. You want to have that team camaraderie. And so it's a fine line. And so, but I think the biggest thing when it comes down to it, when you're really struggling on, should I let this person go or not, is looking at if they're coachable and adaptable and wanting to learn.
And it comes right back around to that point that all three of you have made so many times. It's all about that culture, whether that be your internal culture that you're cultivating, or external culture. Well, I think that's a really great place to wrap things up. Just a really quick rapid fire. I like to end things on a positive note. So 10 seconds or less. If each of you could just go by, we'll start with Lorena, go to Ryan, and then go to MJ. What is one thing you're most excited about for the rest of 2020? And what's something that you think is going to be, could be personal, could be professional, could be for the industry as a whole? Love to hear just one very positive end note from each of you.
Yeah, so I'm really excited to see where the cannabis space is by the end of all this, because as this pandemic is evolving and, you know, the economy is taking a big hit, you know, I feel like cannabis is really standing out as, you know, we're now essential, and that speaks volumes as to where we were 10 years ago, you know. So seeing that during this global pandemic, you know, I really am excited to see where we're able to progress, and hopefully more rapidly towards, you know, federal reform, and just kind of seeing where that goes as a whole for the cannabis industry.
Yeah, I'm going to, in a way, second what Larina was just saying there as well, because I think it's also a thing of being part of NCIA here as well, which I notice not everyone is, but, you know, is this idea of activism and being involved in the conversation. And if we aren't involved in the conversation, who's going to be shaping that? And so this whole idea of cannabis is now essential. It's been proven out in almost every state that allows cannabis, whether it's rec or medical, that we need to have cannabis and allow people to have access to it. I think it's going to only open up federal possibilities this year and evolve that conversation. And I really hope it does, but we can't do that unless everyone's joining that conversation and putting their input on it, you know, whether it's lobby days or just going and having a conversation with your statewide or local political leadership. That way you can have a better conversation and be ready to engage here in 2020.
Awesome. You know, I definitely agree with what they're both saying. And I think that as the rest of this year plays out, I think education and how we roll out, whether you're a brand or you're a dispensary, or whatever you play in this market, is how you bring that forward, because everyone is looking at us, and it is a big opportunity for us. And even with what's currently going on with social justice and kind of equality and all that, you know, all the protest rights going on. And I think that plays a huge shift, because you look at cannabis and prohibition, and that all kind of plays a part in it. And so I'm excited to see some change. So I think that as we get through this pandemic and get through kind of everything that's going on, as long as cannabis, we can continue to bridge the gap. And that's between whether it's mainstream, old school cannabis, and continue to educate, understand where we came from, and move it forward, that it's going to be exciting over the next year to see what happens.
Excellent. Thank you all so much for sharing your
Thank you guys.
Your insights and your positivity. It's been a really engaging and enlightening discussion. So I really appreciate all your time. And Brian, over to you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Liz, and thank you so much to all of our panelists. That was a very engaging conversation, and thanks to all the audience members that participated as well. Why don't we give all these panelists a virtual round of applause? Let them know by posting a quick message in the chat what the best thing that you're taking away from today's conversation is. And if you're in the audience, do raise your hand just to give them a little virtual clap. So with that, we do want to conclude the presentation with just a tease of some upcoming Industry Essentials webinars that we have taking place this week, as well as an announcement for the virtual edition of some of our networking events for all of our members out there. So we hope you all will continue your participation by joining us for the next 2 editions of our ever-expanding Industry Essentials educational webinar series taking place just this week. Next up on Wednesday morning, we have another edition of our NCIA Committee Insights series, which is being hosted by our Scientific Advisory Committee. This talk will feature Tiffany Coleman, Director of Quality at Copper State Farms Management, and Cynthia Shelby Lane of Shelby Lane MD, presenting a session entitled Understanding Label Claims, which will explore how label claims came to be, what they look like in sister industries, and why label claims are important for cannabis products. Following that, shortly afterwards, on Wednesday afternoon, we have the next edition of our Policy Council Conversation series featuring insights and invaluable content directly from members of NCIA's Policy Council, the preeminent think tank for the cannabis industry. This is a really special session and is entitled Just Say No, Keep the DEA Out of Cannabis Research, and will feature an all-star panel of legal experts, cannabis researchers, and former DEA staff members to discuss the critical importance of cannabis research, the DEA rulemaking, and NCIA's numerous objections during that process, as well as the lawsuit against DEA and the resulting disclosure of the DOJ policy memo. These sessions are both free for NCIA members as well as non-members to attend. So if you haven't already, please head to NCIA's website to sign up today and invite as many of your colleagues who might be interested as well. We've all felt the hit from a lack of exposure at in-person events these past few months. And as always, NCIA is here to assist. We're offering a number of incredibly valuable digital marketing packages across all of our highly trafficked platforms. So if you haven't, please head to our website to learn more and schedule a meeting with one of our biz dev team to discuss in more detail today. And last but not least, I would like to formally announce and invite all of you to attend the debut of our new Cannabis Caucus Cyber series taking place across next month. We're taking everything you love about the Cannabis Caucuses and reformatting them into a one-of-a-kind virtual experience. To kick things off, you'll receive exclusive access to industry insights delivered firsthand from national and regional leaders. Next, we'll conduct a live Q&A session with audience members to provide the interaction you've come to expect from participating in an in-person NCIA event. Finally, join us for a happy half hour for an exclusive live musical performance while interacting with your regional network and partaking in our curated libations and recipes for the evening. We will be hosting these events in the locations we had to cancel in March due to COVID-19. And while these, of course, will be regionally focused gatherings, feel free to tune in from anywhere you may be. Always wanted to participate in all of our regional cannabis caucuses, but never had the time, money, or physical ability to be in 2 places at once. But we finally have the solution for you. So what are you waiting for? Sign up today, then kick back, light up, and put your headset on. This will be the new way for NCIA members to stay connected, get informed, and take action in cyberspace. And with that, thank you all so much once again for participating in another NCIA Industry Essentials educational webinar. Please complete the attendee survey after leaving the meeting room to gain immediate access to our presentation and exclusive 30-day access to a formatted video recording sent directly to your email inbox. I hope you all enjoy a wonderful week, and I look forward to seeing you all again next time for another NCIA Industry Essentials educational webinar. Have a great day.